Hi, and welcome back to another episode of the Canary Room, Season 6, Episode 3 of the show. Massive thanks to everyone for all of the kind comments on the show that we did with Keith. We will be back at Keith's again later this year. I know it's a show everybody looks forward to. It's a show I love doing, absolutely love doing. We will be on the road a few more times this year as well, so plenty to look forward to. While I'm thanking people, huge thanks to Mike Burling, huge thanks to Debbie Stout, and indeed to everybody who has taken the time to donate to the channel. Your donations help fund the sort of expenses, if you like, that the channel incurs. So the tripod broke, so thankfully I managed to buy a new tripod, which means that you won't suddenly see me disappearing, which is what was happening with it. So thanks to everybody. If you have the opportunity, you'll see on the homepage of our YouTube channel there's a little donate button. So massive thanks to that. Well, what have we got coming up on the show today? You might be able to hear in the background there is a little bit more noise in the room. We are moving closer to canary breeding season 2023. Not just canaries, of course, but the breeding season in the Canary Room is moving ever closer. We've had Charlotte's 3rd birthday, so I managed to capture on film the moment in which she received her very first bird. I'll let you decide whether she was underwhelmed or not. I thought she did okay for a 3-year-old. I thought she did okay. We've got a little look today at some of the whites. So some of the white canaries, we've got 4 white fifes to start a new white line. So we'll talk about that a little bit. We'll catch up with the Norwich, we'll catch up with the red poles. I'm sure there'll be lots to catch up on as we go throughout the day. You know what to do, everyone. Grab yourself a cuppa, sit back and enjoy the show. So the early part of February, late January, has been very much about preparation for breeding season 2023. I mentioned, I think in episode 1 of the show, this time out, I'm doing things slightly differently. So the first thing that we've done this year is, well, we stripped the Canary Room of all of its cages. There is 94 cages in the Canary Room. That in itself was a monumental task. I'm indebted to Claire for all of her help. Claire, and we can see, here she is. She's not particularly happy about me using this shot, to be honest, but I'm going to anyway. She doesn't watch the show, so she'll never know. Just don't tell her. Here she is, Marigold's on, doing the clean. So she actually, God love her, she cleaned every single one of the cages. You can see little spin round the room, little tour of the room, the cages. When they were out, that gave me the opportunity to clean the floor, gave me the opportunity to clean the walls, so everything has been washed down with a bleach solution and an anti-mite solution. So really it's about preparing the environment to make sure that we have as successful a breeding season as we possibly can. Now, the weather in the UK over the last few weeks has gone a little bit chilly again. So I have a little sort of, it takes the frost off the room, heater in here for my benefit more than anything else. But we haven't had any frozen drinkers, but it has been, we have had night frosts and we've had a couple of hard frosts as well. So gently, slowly building the birds up. So that really was the deep clean, and you can see here, putting the cages back in. I filmed this, I thought, and I'm going to speed it up for you because it's 26 minutes of me manhandling cages. So I'm going to speed it up for you. You can see I'm putting one of the rows back in. It's the main breeding block. It's got 36 cages in it. It's got 6 rows of 6 cages. And you can see all of those cages had been washed down, wiped down. And then it was just a question of putting them back in situ in the room. Now, the eagle-eyed of you will notice that at the moment there are no cage fronts on the cages. Good spot. What I'm doing is all of the cage fronts I've given a little rub down to, and I'm just giving them a quick spray in time for the season. All of the cage furniture, so the perches, the seed hoppers, the drinkers, all of those have been bleached. They've all been cleaned down in anodine. So we have a sort of, say, a sterile environment, because it's far from a sterile environment, but we have a situation here in the room now where everything has been taken. The tops and the bottoms of the cages have been washed, the backs of them have been washed, the drawers have been taken out and washed and scrubbed, so everything has been scrubbed. So any residual mite that may have been in the shed, hopefully we've got rid of. We will do a smoke bomb, so I've got just here, I'm using these ones. I've seen various different ones. This is a Pronafit one, which I've used a few times. Makes the room smell lovely. Its effectiveness, to be honest, I don't think it does any harm, apart from if you're a mite. Is it the only thing to do to treat mite? No, absolutely not. You'll remember from episode 1 that we are using a mite treatment as well. So we're giving that in the water. We are giving that as recommended. So, you know, we're mixing that solution, we're giving it to the birds as it's recommended to. So hopefully this sort of early preparation, this sort of detailed preparation will benefit us for the season ahead. So cage fronts will go back on in the next week or so. What I will do, and this is a decision I've made really, is those cages which are going to be empty cages for now, at least until hopefully we have some young. I'm going to leave those cages with without their cage fronts on, just simply because it'll mean that they're easier for me to clean. So before I put any birds anywhere, I will go through and spray and wipe down the cages again, and I'll use Clean and Clear Check Mite to do that, just as a final precaution. And anyone who's kept birds will know that, you know, we do all of these things, and irregardless of how much we do, we will, somewhere along the season, particularly as the weather in the UK warms up, we will get elements of mite. Now, what I have noticed on the birds since I've been using the Exalt on them is that the birds, as I've caught them up, there's no visual signs of any mite on there, so the mite aren't living on the birds. Now, northern mite will live on a host, red mite will feed off a host. Red mite you'll normally see in the cracks and the nooks and crannies of things, so things like, you know, where the cage fronts go in. These cages, obviously built and made by Dave Rands, are sort of fabulous for not having too many nooks and crannies, although I do have drawers, which obviously gives them somewhere to hide behind or underneath. So prevention, we'll really try hard to keep them going. So that's our cleaning out the cages. Let's have a quick look now at some of the birds, and I'll talk through what I've done with them. So, we've talked about cleaning the cages, we've talked about why we do it. Do you know what? It's really boring, I know that, but it's part of the husbandry of bird keeping. So that deep clean before the season starts is really, it's that preparation for the breeding season ahead. And the hard yards we put in now will pay dividends throughout the season, and that's what we're focused on here, certainly in the canary room. So those hard yards, yeah, there's, you know, lugging cages, cleaning cages. It's not fun. I'm not going to pretend it's fun. There's a tremendous sense of satisfaction when it's done, and you come into a bright, sparkling white bird room again. So, talked about the cages, let's talk about the birds. When I went to Keith's, you'll know that he was using a doxycycline clear out for the birds, and absolutely, must just say that this is something that you should do in the sort of 6 weeks before you plan to breed. So as this episode goes out, think about it. If you haven't done it now, think about it really for next year, okay? So 7 days I used of doxycycline treatment on the birds. I used a deionized water, which I purchased off Amazon. And I've got all of the birds now in these flight cages. So I've got all of the hens in here. So there's some red-black grey-wing hens in here. There's some feeder hens in here, as well as all the fife hens. I've got the siskin and the red-poll males in this cage, and the siskin and the red-poll females in this flight cage here. In this cage, I've got all of my cockbirds, with the exception of the Norwich. And the Norwich, the cocks and hens, are all in the bottom cage, and I can hear one of the Norwich boys absolutely belting it out. So the key for this was the clear out. So a week of doxycycline, and then what I've done is I've given the birds, following the doxycycline, I've given them a Prolite C, which is an Aviform product. It's a basically it's Electrolux, it's all kinds of things to help rebuild the gut. I also used Yakult, much to Claire's amusement. When she saw that I'd bought Yakult, she was like, oh, look at that, I could do with that for my breakfast. And I said, you can, of course, have some, darling, but it's for the birds. So, like many fanciers, the birds in this place get better fed than everybody else. So that was the clean out for the birds. We're now on the build-up. We know when it comes to conditioning birds that, yes, it's about the feeding regime, it's about the availability of different foods. So we're looking at, we've got various different things that we're giving them. We've given them millet, just to keep them interested in the flights, to be honest, to try and keep them, from pecking each other too much. We've got the, obviously their normal seed. We've got egg food that will step up now. We're in February to twice a week. We have just been giving it once a week. We have always available the solution here that we got from Pequay, from Matt at Pequay. I can never remember what it's called. I am sorry, everyone. I did remember it in the last episode, and when I'm putting the edit together, I'll make sure I put a little mention. Unifeed, I've remembered it. My goodness, Unifeed in there, and again, that's from Pequay in the UK here. So we're building the birds up. We're building them up slowly and steadily. We are increasing the light. The plan this year was always to breed a little bit later. So you can probably hear the cocks are in good voice. There's a red-black grey-wing absolutely belting out in here, which is lovely to hear and see. The cocks are in really good voice, so what we're going to do with the cockbirds is to keep them as long as we possibly can in these flight cages, for two reasons, really. One, it gives them the opportunity to exercise, and two, from a management perspective, it's easier. So, particularly if I'm giving treatments in the water, I can essentially, with 2, 4, 6, 8 drinkers, I can essentially treat the entire shed, rather than, as happens in the season, 90 odd drinkers, which from a time-saving perspective is clearly quite important. So we've cleaned the birds out. Now, what do we mean by cleaning the birds out? Well, what we're trying to ensure is that there isn't any either bacterial infections or gut infections or anything else like that that will fundamentally impact them when it comes to breeding. We will, over the course in the run-up to the breeding season, continue to put grog, which I use from Pantex, to sort of try and prevent black spot, which, black spot's a huge issue with chick mortality. So we've cleaned the room, we've cleaned the birds, and the only other thing to say really is I took the baths off while I was giving them the treatment, so there was only one source of water. So I haven't put baths on for a couple of weeks. The baths will go on this weekend again. I mentioned it at the outset of the show. Let's take a step inside now. Our little baby girl was 3 on, last Sunday, as you watched the show. And we already know from Myth Cages we had a very beautifully built, handmade cage for her. Absolutely stunning piece of work, beautiful piece of work. So much so that it was the only thing that would be allowed in the house. So here she is. This is the moment new bird was revealed. Look. Do you know what's here? This is your present.
Oh, what? It's a birdie? Birdie is my present.
Yeah? What are you going to call him?
Birdie.
Birdie, what a great name.
Oh, it's beautiful. It's beautiful.
The word that you might not be able to capture on the end there is it's beautiful. And I tell you what, as a dad, I was bursting with pride. And I am not going to be anything other than truthful, as I always am on the Canary Room. I had a little bit of a tear at that moment in time. I thought, that's it, my little girl has got her first little bird. And it's called Birdie, by the way. And it's beautiful. So her words, not mine. So thanks to everybody who helped make that happen. Myth Cages, who I bought the cage from. Thanks a lot, mate. Absolutely diamond. Really appreciate it. And of course, Shane at Direct Bird Products for supplying the bird. So yeah, absolutely made up. And as we can see here, you know, the bird very, very content in its new surroundings. I'm always inspired at my visits to Keith. I'm always inspired. I admire the quality of the birds that I get to see there, and the husbandry. And actually, over the last few years, Keith's become a really, really close and good friend. And I really enjoy the camaraderie, which I think many of you have picked up on. So this year with the Norwich, you know, it's a sort of really trying to cement and build a volume and quality of numbers in the shed. That's the plan with the Norwich. We did have a loss. We lost a variegated yellow cock, which I was gutted about, absolutely gutted about. Fine, one day, you know, no sign of them clogging, which is one of the things that, particularly within the flights, you've got to just keep an eye on. No sign of that. No explanation. And that happens sometimes. So that's meant a little bit of a change in plan. We're going to have to probably run a couple of birds as pairs to start with, and then we'll have a couple of hens that we might be able to run them over. So, you know, there are worse problems, aren't there, to have. So Norwich-wise, everything is looking in good form. Just got to keep our fingers crossed for them. They're all in one flight cage at the moment. What I will start to do with the Norwich as we move into the second and probably third week of February is I will start to single off some of the cockbirds. I'll leave the hen, certainly the hen Norwich, in the flights for at least another 2 or 3 weeks. They will be the last birds to come out of the flight cages. So we'll leave them in there for a little bit longer. With the fifes, I've got 16 fife cockbirds to run with this year. Now, plan was always 12 and 18 hens, and I've got 16 cockbirds and 22 hens, which is still, I think, 4 cockbirds fewer than last year and about 8 hens fewer than last year. So I have trimmed down although perhaps not as aggressive in the trimming as I initially thought I might be. And what's the reasons behind that? Well, the reason behind that is sort of quite simple. This year, I have a sort of, and I try and do it every year really. I have a project that I want to work on with the fifes. So regular viewers to the show will be acutely aware of my limited success, which is another way of saying abject failure, of breeding and establishing a cinnamon line of birds. And I'm not a quitter, ladies and gentlemen. I am not a quitter. So we know that we've got a fawn cockbird, which is obviously white ground, which we picked up from Matt Dando. We've got that in the shed for this year, and I'm going to run that with a cinnamon hen, variegated cinnamon buff hen, and I'm going to run it with a fawn hen. So I'm going to do white to white in that sense, so fawn to fawn. So all of the offspring should be fawn, cocks or hens, and certainly all of the birds that I breed will be visually cinnamon. So my preference with cinnamon is to use a good carrier cockbird over cinnamon hens. I haven't done that this year. I've got a trio essentially of cinnamons. So cinnamon fawn cock, or fawn hen, and a visual cinnamon hen. The other thing which I'm sort of focused on, and really the plan for this year is going to be the creation of a new white line. Now, over the years, in the 20 plus years that I've kept fifes, I've always done quite well with allieds. 3 or 4 years back, probably 4 years back now, many of you will remember I had a variegated white cockbird in the room, which produced some really, really nice young for me. That was a really nice bird. I have had the occasional blue. I've had, a few sort of fawn birds. Obviously, they're white ground birds as well. But it's been about 7 years since I've had a stud of white birds, so clearer white birds, very lightly variegated birds. As I say, 6 years. In fact, I found 2016, so that's 7 years now. I found a picture of some of the babies that are bred, and there was sort of 3 whites from this nest you can see here of the young birds, a couple of whites and a variegated white. So the plan this year has been to establish a collection of whites. So I've got a couple of clear buff cocks to go with a couple of white hens, and I've got a couple of other hens, probably a yellow and a buff, variegated buff, to go with a couple of white ground cocks. So what have I done with the white ground birds this year? Well, many of you will know that my birds have been line bred. There have been the occasional outcross from here and there over the years, but predominantly I've fished in the same pool. And of course, I've done that again this year. I went back to see Gerald. Actually, when I was filming the YCC, I popped in on the way back from filming the YCC to Gerald's house and picked up a very, very nice variegated white cockbird. Now, this time of the year, we'll have a little look at him in one of the cages here. This time of the year is not a time to study the quality of birds. As they're getting fit, they pull tight, they pull like pencils. They've been in a flight cage, so it's not the time to look at them and go, is that a quality bird or not? I've seen it, I know what it's got, I know what it lacks, and I know what I'm going to do with it. So that's the first of the white cockbirds that we've got. My visit to Keith was productive for lots of different reasons. And one of the reasons it was productive, because it always is when I go and see Keith, it's always lovely to spend time with Keith and Margaret, was I came away with this little fellow. Now, Keith has been developing quite a successful line of white birds, variegated white birds. I know what this bird needs. He's got quite a lot of feather on him, so I think I'm going to pair him to a yellow hen, a clear yellow hen. But something for me to work with. So that bird's coming from Keith. The third bird that we're going to look at is the first of two of our white hens. Now, this is a pure white hen bird, bred by a good friend of mine, John Evans. It's 50% my blood, so it came out of a clear yellow cock bird that I let John have 2 or 3 years ago now, which was a really nice cock bird. This bird, it needs a buff to go with it. It's a bit yellowy on the tinge, but it's a clear white and it's got sort of 50% of my blood in it. And then the final bird, the final hen we can see, has got a little dark tail, and I do like birds, clear birds with a dark tail. I've got a clear Norwich with a dark tail. I've got this Fife with a dark tail, which I like them. I don't know why. Visually, they appeal to me. So this is the final bird, and this has come in from Shane Evans. Now, many of you will be sitting watching this thinking, hang on a second, Matt, for 6 seasons you've gone on about not bringing birds in from here, there and everywhere. And what you seem to have just done is brought birds in from here, there and everywhere. And to an extent, you'd be right. The bird from Shane is completely unrelated to anything that I've got. The bird from Keith is completely unrelated to anything I've got. Let me tell you why. So there's 2 reasons why. Firstly, obviously, the availability of stock. So, you know, if somebody who you normally go to hasn't got what you want, you can wait for it, and wait for it and wait for it in the hope that one day they might have it, or you can go elsewhere. And that was part of the rationale. But the main reason was, with the white birds, I have found over a number of years, and this isn't always the case, and other people will completely disagree with me, and that's absolutely fine. I found that there's almost a genetic weakness in white birds, white ground birds, and it's one of the reasons why people talk about a lethal factor of not pairing white and white together. I know lots of very successful breeders do pair white ground birds together. It's not something I've done. I will be doing it this year with the 2 fawn birds. But I have thought about the relative vigour of these birds. And so by bringing in different outcrosses, some of which are related to my birds, some of which aren't, I'm hoping that I can add an extra little bit of vigour in the whites. This is a work in progress, so there's going to be 4 pairs of whites in the canary room for this year. Stay tuned. Let's see, because there's bound to be heartache, isn't there? Let's see how many white birds we can breed by the end of the year. It'll either be hundreds or none. Let's hope it's the former. And so really, before we go, it's the British finches, and predominantly red poles. We have got a pair of native bullfinches. We've got a pair of native goldfinches in the flight outside. Flight outside is the next project, so that's going to be cleaned, stripped down, and new sort of cover and nest boxes put in for the year. The British in the room, we've got a pair of twites to come in. Still, we've got a number of pairs of red poles. We'll probably run 4 or 5 pairs of red poles next year, or this year rather. We've got a pair of siskins, a pair of twites, and then the idea is to keep the bottom flight completely empty. So that's our sort of plan with these birds. They're looking in good nick. I've seen a few picking up bits and bobs. It's just slightly concerning because it's quite early. But I'm sure that's just, they're just practicing at this stage. But the Red Pole Diaries, as I mentioned in episode 1, will return in full glory. And what I've done, and again, it's part of the long game of preparation, what I've done for the Red Poles is basically spoken to a few neighbours and some of my mum's neighbours, people I know who've got fruit trees, and the back end of last year we did a little bit of pruning and have a rather large apple branch, which has, much to my mum's disappointment, has been seasoning in her, we call it the extension. It is an extension to the side of the house. The birds have been in there before now. But we have in the extension we have that bit of wood seasoning. So what you want to do if you're using natural perches, first and foremost, you've got to make sure that, you know, they are clean, so it will all be disinfected and bleached before it comes in here. And secondly, you've got to make sure that you season them. Largely, I will make perches out of it, and I'll show you how I do that on a later episode. I make perches for the native British finches, and we'll use some in the flights as well. But it needs to dry out, otherwise I've done it before where I've just cut them and then, you know, plugged them in, and after a couple of weeks they fall out because they're not big enough. The water comes out of them essentially. So that's one of the things that we'll be doing with the native finches to get them all ship shape. That's something to look forward to. I'm looking forward to the British this year. It'd be great to have twites back in the room. It's been a long time since I've had twites in the room. So looking forward to that. Beautiful song on them. Beautiful little cheeping noise on the twite. So lovely, lovely bird. And yeah, I think with the British, that's probably about it for now. It's going to be another 6 weeks or so. Once the Canaries are out of this cage here and this cage here, so this is hens, this is cocks, that will allow me to prepare these cages ready for the native birds to breed. I haven't put them together as yet. Obviously, I will put them together. I've got wire dividers which separate these. So these flight cages are over 8 foot long. They're 30 odd inches high. So they are sort of decent sized cages for the birds. And I have had, although not last year, I have, you know, bred goldfinches in here, I've bred bullfinches in here, I've bred siskins in here, I've bred red poles in here. So they are decent sized cages, and let's hope that we have a successful run with them this time out. And the one final thing to touch on before we go is the new colours. They're absolutely belting, absolutely belting. Looking forward to them. I've been quite firm in my selection of the birds that I've kept, why I've kept them. So you know, they will be doing a job of helping me rear some of the Norwich, fingers crossed, but they'll also do a job for me in their own right. They're in the bird room on their own right. So we'll see how they get on. Okay, everyone, that's all we've got time for. I will be at Stafford. I'll mention that again in the next episode. I will be at the Stafford Showground in March. If you see me, come and say hello. I will be there picking up some supplies. I'll go and see Shane and the Direct Bird product stands. I'll go and see Sam at Sam One and DTV Plastics as well, so I know they'll all be there. Don't forget to check them out. So, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, why not? What's stopping you? Hit the subscribe, hit the notification bell. Until next time, everyone, take care.